What is up? It's Kendall here from Giftbox Creative, and today I am going to review a great product called Mastering the Logo Grid by Jeroen Van Eerden, and he has made an amazing product. There's some really great features that he's actually included in this package, as well as a few tutorial things that he's actually included as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and go over this product. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. So we have this package called a logo grid guide, and essentially it's made for designers who want to improve their logo grid skills. It comes with tons of mock-ups, templates that you're able to use within your logo design process if you're not familiar with creating grid systems. So this is just a great way to actually use the logo grid so that your logos have much more of a geometric application to them. Now, of course, this doesn't work for all logos. It really just depends on the needs that the client has and the problem that you're trying to solve, as well as the industry that it's involved in. But overall, it's a really great and phenomenal product. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through a few of the features here that we have broken down. So here we have the logo grid guide. Obviously, here having so essentially these are broken up into templates. So with the templates that we have here, it makes it easy to look at and figure out which one is going to be the ideal version for you to use for your project. So of course you have the purpose of the grids, sorts of grids, and a quick guide on essentially how to start when making these grid systems. So moving on, we have grid examples. Of course, there's different like square-based grids that you have here. It talks about the golden ratio and how the golden ratio actually plays a part into the design process and what it can do to help you as a graphic designer in implementing that into your project. Next here we have the grid settings. Here it's talking about the ways that the colors in the grid system are being used, and the brighter colors standing out more, but how you can also create contrasting colors within that grid system so that the clients, when they're going back through, when they're looking at the elements that you have, how these can effectively be used. And finally, we have the templates. So here it essentially comes with three base templates. You have the format, the square, and the data for this template. And you have in this one, in template number 2, there's going to be a square and a minimal based template. So unlike the first one, the first template, if I go back here, the first one, as you can see here, it follows the grid lines, and it's basically locked into the essentially the grid line system that has been set up for Adobe Illustrator. So if you have the grid selected, or if you have a complex grid that you want to use and you have your settings made to adjusted to move by the grid, then this is something that you may want to incorporate depending on the level of complexity that's going to be needed for the client. So I'll just go ahead and we'll remove those real quick. And of course, the template number 2, this is much more of a simplistic, straightforward, minimalistic grid system. And I'm actually going to go ahead and create a grid system here in just a moment using a very minimal, very square-based system. But if you have a lot of logos that you have to go ahead and put out for clients, and you want to keep things consistent, and you don't want to have to go back and manually create your grid lines for each and every project, as well as having the proportions and the actual margins, then this is something that can definitely come in handy to go ahead and just speed up that process. And finally, the third template is much more of a free-styling grid. Now, this is much more complex than all the other grids. As you can tell, it has much more diagonals and horizontal, vertical lines, also incorporating circular elements as well, if those are something that's going to be used within the grid system within your logo to go ahead and be used within your project. But I'm going to go ahead next and go through the actual templates, and we're just going to go a brief overview of what that looks like. So here I have grid template number 1, And here we have the standard grid template set up here. And if we zoom in, we can see that, turn this on here, seeing that it follows a pretty much a standard grid line system with each module having its relatively same orientation, a relatively simple orientation when it comes. Very straightforward. You have all these individual rows and these columns here, and then these rows here on the left hand side, and then with each X mark letting you know the actual value of that depending on the measurement systems, whether you're using points, picas, or inches. And we have it here in black and white. Well, we have here a blue, essentially one color, and then we have a 2-color or 3-color version here if you want to go ahead and include black, just for contrast depending on the type of logo that you want to put out. And of course, you can go back and change the color. We can go back and change the settings. If you go ahead and open up our layers panel here, we can go back and then we can see that, oh, okay, well, we have this grid here that we can go ahead and easily just go back. And if we wanted to go back and change the color of it, obviously that's something that we'd be able to go ahead and do. And if we wanted to go ahead and switch that to black, we can go ahead and do that. And then that just makes it just easier for us to switch. And next here we have the simple grid. And this is the very simplistic, minimalistic grid design that we're talking about. So here are just the different types you have. These are not outlined. Are they outlined? No, they're not outlined. So you do have the stroke that are still there in place. So then you can also make sure that whatever stroke weight that you want to make sure that you have in there, even though I've selected all of them, but if there is a specific stroke weight that you want to go ahead and select, obviously you can go ahead and do that. For the inside, we have 0.6105, and then for the outside, then for the outer box that's being used, it is 1.834. So we do have two different weights for the inside and the outside. I mean, you can pretty much tell that just by looking at it. But we have like the full color here of multicolored, and then we also have a simple single color here for the contrasting and reversed out version of your logo. And next, finally, here is where we have the much more complex grid. And it's broken up. As you can tell, there's a lot of detail in here, and there are different. You have different lines that may have different values, or may mean something different according to the actual project that you're working on. But luckily, he has actually given us a key, so we can look at here at the key hexagon safe zone, edge markers, trim lines, square icon for the safe zones, and then the base grid measurements. So then he gave us a key that you can actually use with this template, and it makes it easier for you to break down any complex logos that you may have and how those actually come into effect within the actual program, and with your program, or with your projects, I should say, and how those projects can relate to the actual grid's complexity and how they are relevant to the actual project that you're going to use. In this section, this is where I'm clearly going to make the changes to the actual logo itself. And I'm setting up the grid system so that I have a horizontal grid and vertical lines as well. So I went ahead and set up a series of vertical lines, and then now I'm working on the horizontal. Now what I'm doing is I'm aligning each horizontal line to the major touch points on the actual logo mark. And then now I'm doing the vertical grids with the same thing, making it parallel to the vertical lines. And then going back and adjusting the isometric angled lines to all of the angle points because of the way the logo has been structured. And then finally tightening up those lines. And just kind of bringing everything in to make sure it's cohesive across the board. So now this is the part where I go back and actually make adjustments to the actual logo. So I'm looking at the X height, the cab height, and the baseline. But first, I noticed that the distance between the logo mark and the logo type isn't even. Optically, it appears fine. But going back and looking at the grid, it turned out to be the distance. I wanted them to be even across the board. So I go back and I make the adjustments. Once that's made, I go back and I look at the actual margins. Ungroup that. We'll take these and then we'll move these down so that it intersects there. Move this up. So that it properly intersects there. And then, so we have this solid structure here. But we want to make sure that the margin that we have around it is going to be of a particular element. So we got this, we'll pull that out here, and we will make that the standard. So I can copy that, paste it, increase. So it's like that, and then pull this down. Whoop. Take this element, and then pull that down here. And it should be even all the way around. So all the way around we have those boxes. Same thing here at the bottom. Probably do another stroke here so we can intersect it, pull a stroke here. Make sure that it lines up. Same thing with the horizontal, or with the vertical lines. Just want to make sure that it now the height and the width between the boxes are different, which is why you have this. If I pull this here, it fits. But that tells you that the height and the width are different, and you want, for this, the way that we structured this, we have more on the vertical side than we do in the horizontal, simply because of the shape of the element that we used. However, because it's primarily, this is primarily a horizontal logo, we want to make sure that it's going to be consistent. So I see that's off. That's on. Okay. Don't want to get too much detail. I mess with that too much. But make sure that it's just going to be consistent. And it seems like it's both the tips at the bottom and the grids at the top. So that is pretty much what we have here, the logo. And then we can just say it's, call that margin element margin. All right. Cool. And so we've got the logo, we've got the grid, we've got the margin. Now the margin, you don't have to necessarily just do the actual shape. Let's say that for the grid, for the actual use of what was used in the grid, we know that the shape has been made, the margin has been made up of the shape. Well, we know that the margin has been made up of the shape. But the actual design, which is simply a rectangle. And so we can do that. We can go rectangle here. We can pull that out just like that. Create another one, just like that. Set another one here, just like that. And do this one just like that. And there you have it. You have a solid logo grid here. You have the margins. You have the columns for respect to the tracking and the kerning that's being used. You can go back and put individual markers if you'd like to let them know to indicate the actual distance between the two, whether you're using an actual grid to be locked up by, or whether you're kind of using a grid initially and then free flowing it. So that's pretty much like the basis of what had been taught in one of the tricks that I've learned in actually creating a grid structure for my logos and making sure that all the elements that I have there have been properly divided up so that we know exactly the respective space that needs to happen across the entire board for congruency. Obviously, the grid can be as simple or as complex as you like. So we can go back and just take this path here and we'll go back, do a grid, we'll hide that. We don't need that layer anymore. We can delete that. Go to the grid here and we can hide that. And then bring that up here. And then bring that down here. And so now we have it set up to where we actually have, without the grid entirely, the margins there, then the grid system there. This is without showing the actual grid, but you still have the elements within. So that's there. And it looks like here that there is an element missing. So we just go back and we'll fix that. We'll just go back and make some more adjustments on it here. I'm just going to tighten this up just a lot more. Looks like there were some things that were missed a little bit. So I've got these going horizontally. There's not a marker here either, so we go back and we'll fix that. And make sure that that's there. Might have deleted that before. And of course, there's different ways to actually do it and implement it. But going back, look at the grid system that we have here. And then the individual vertical lines as well. The vertical, horizontal, and then of course the isometric grid that we have here in the green. So that just makes it just a little bit more detailed depending on whether we want to go ahead and focus on these vertical, these columns and these margins, or the actual isometric. So that takes care of that, because this logo here is 3D. It is isometric. So having those isometric lines as well as the vertical and the horizontal grid lines will help. And then of course having these individual lines here for the actual logo, as well as the tracking and the kerning, if you wanted to go ahead and incorporate that. If you're doing any outdoor signage, that may be a great mock-up to have the dimensions for that. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. There's a little extended version here because I know there's a lot of things that I kind of, as I began to look at it, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't finished. There are some things there that are missing, but we went ahead and got those in. So just let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what you think of this product. Once again, it is called Mastering the Logo Grid, and it's a great product by Jeroen Van Eerden. And so this is a great product, and I couldn't recommend it more enough if you want to go ahead and get really intricate when it comes to actually creating grids for your logos. And I will see you in the next one.